Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with reference recordings. Oh, how exciting. We just did Bach's Goldberg variations, and one of you very astutely commented, well, next up, Beethoven's Diabelli variations. Well, that wasn't necessarily true. And the reason it wasn't necessarily true is because the two works are regarded very, very differently. In musical circles, they are the apex of variation form. Bach's the Baroque form of variations, where the actual theme has nothing to do with the variations. It's actually a harmonic pattern that's eked out by the bass line to the theme, and that's what's varied. Beethoven's variations are much closer to what we normally consider to be variations, that is, variations on a tune of some kind. In this case, a rather trite and charming little waltz by Anton Diabelli, who wanted all of Austrian music land to contribute a variation to a book he was putting together, a commemorative book, and he wrote this little tune, and everybody tossed out a variation. Liszt is in it. He was like 9 at the time, I think. Schubert's in it. And then Beethoven sent him this enormous tome that is, arguably the most profound set of variations ever written for the keyboard, alongside Bach's. And that was it for variations for keyboard, until Frederick Rzewski did The People United Will Never Be Defeated, which is right up there. And I also think Anton Reicher's L'Art du Varier, his variations are also fascinating, but that's a separate topic, right? The bottom line is that for some reason, the Diabelli variations have never quite caught on in the public mind the way the Goldberg variations have. I mean, the Goldberg variations are part of popular culture now. I mean, Hannibal Lecter listened to the Goldberg variations. I mean, that you can't have a bigger recommendation than that. They just are this looming presence in our musical life. Whereas a lot of people who may love the Goldberg variations don't even know that Beethoven wrote the Diabelli variations. And, it's a strange thing. Part of the reason may be because it's late Beethoven, and late Beethoven has a reputation for being rather abstruse and transcendental and spacey and beyond the sphere of mere mortal comprehension. I don't know. I've always enjoyed the Diabelli variations. I think it's a wonderful piece. Great fun to listen to, full of character and charm and wit, and I mean, it's all there. It really is. And people love Beethoven's piano sonatas, well, at least the middle ones. The late ones, again, are part of that rarefied connoisseurship that may have prevented the Diabelli variations from gaining the popularity that they deserve. And for that reason, I decided to do a reference recording video for them, because they don't get recorded as often as the Goldbergs. They have only really come into their own, I think, fairly recently on disc. I don't know how many people are actually listening to them, but there are many, many, many more recordings of them than there used to be, and some of them are extraordinarily fine. There have been excellent period instrument versions of them, too. Which is also a lovely thing. I mean, Ronald Brautigam did it. Andreas Steyer did a fabulous one, and very fine recordings on normal instruments as well. I mean, Igor Levit just did them. So yeah, I mean, they're out there. They're out and about. But the reference recording is a different question. And because we're talking about consensus, the consensus for the Diabelli variations has to mainly be a critical consensus, because there isn't really a popular consensus. With the Goldberg variations, it was clear. You have the record sales to prove it, but with the Diabelli variations, you don't. And it's also a work, because of its rarity and infrequency of performance, that has a relatively late reference recording. People were waiting to see what the reference was going to be. There was always this sense that, what else can we find in the work? Has everything been said? Do we have a sense of what the possibilities are interpretively? And can we judge then what a real reference recording is? Because there are many, many works which don't have reference recordings. And you think they ought to. I mean, one of the most famous, I always bring it up, is Tchaikovsky's Manfred Symphony. I mean, the Liszt, Faust, and Dante symphonies. These works, they have wonderful performances. But could you put your finger on it and say, yeah, that's the one against which all the others are going to be measured? It's very, very difficult for some of those pieces as well. I think you could also say that's true of Beethoven's Hammerklavier Sonata. They're deliberately difficult works, or works which are somehow placed in a Empyrean realm which is beyond our mortal ability to judge, sort of. I don't know if that makes any sense, but you get the point, right? Certain works just resist being referencized or referentiated, whatever you want to call it. So there is, however, a reference recording for the Beethoven Diabelli variations, and in this case, it's changed. It's changed rather frequently. Well, it's changed 3 times that I'm aware of, that I can trace. The first reference recording for the Beethoven Diabelli variations, these are all still wonderful performances, by the way, is Rudolf Serkin. Now, Rudolf Serkin's was made, where was it? I'm going to put that there. Rudolf Serkin's was done in like the early 50s, I think, somewhere around there. It's in mono. That's one of the reasons it didn't remain the reference, maybe, because it needed to be redone in stereo. Let me find, where is it on this? It's in this box here, CD 10. So let's get to CD 10, and here it is, his Diabelli variations, and it was recorded 19. Okay, it says here, let's see, tracks 1 through 30, 1957. In Marlborough. It could have been stereo, it seems to be, but, well, it's not. So anyway, there it is. It's a wonderful performance. I mean, Serkin was known as a Beethoven pianist of great seriousness, and also an intellectually probing pianist, the kind who you would expect to really ace the Diabelli variations. I mean, he really did. And other pianists were doing it, by the way. I mean, let's not forget, Richter did them, with like a mistuned piano, if I'm not mistaken, and nobody thought much of it. But other people, there were other versions out there. There really were. But Serkin's was the one, a great Beethoven pianist doing this very unusual work, and he never returned to it. It only sort of added to the myth of the Diabelli's, diabellitude. I don't know, diabellitudinous. Something happened that made them somewhat difficult to grasp. So after Serkin, we had this one, Stephen Bishop Kovacevic, who's now, the problem with this is that he never made up his mind what his name was. He began life, there you go, as Stephen Bishop. His real name was Stephen Kovacevic. For a while, he was Stephen Bishop Kovacevic, which made it impossible to remember. And now he's just Stephen Kovacevic. But back in the day, the stereo version was this one. Now, it was because here's a guy, he was known for doing Beethoven, for sure. He specialized in Beethoven. He was not the biggest name out there. The Diabelli variations was a niche waiting to be filled because there weren't many recordings of it out there. So a Beethoven specialist pianist took on the Diabelli variations, and everybody noticed, particularly the British press. And this was a version that was particularly good for reference status because it's just a touch impersonal. What I mean by that is it represents the work without a lot of eccentricity or egomania on the part of the performer. It's very well played. It's certainly characterful. He characterizes the variations, but it doesn't do demented things. And so it made a wonderful stereo reference version, and it was so flogged, particularly by the British press. And I don't say that because they're British. I say that because that's what they did, and they weren't wrong. It's nothing wrong with that at all. This was the one. And it's a beautiful performance. Now, Kovacevic, as Stephen Kovacevic, re-recorded the Diabelli variations for Onyx in a performance that was quite different, far more characterful and far more flavorful in some respects than this original version, which was more sober and you might say respectful of the text. But by then it didn't matter because the reference recording had come out. And the reference recording is Claudio Arrau. This is the one that's in the big Claudio Arrau box. It actually has a nicer cover. The original jacket one, I think, is in the overflow room, because when I get boxes, I tend to take all the single stuff and stick it in the overflow room. But the bottom line is, Claudio Arrau was a Beethoven pianist of enormous seriousness and character and provenance, and he waited until rather late in his career to take on the Diabelli variations, and this recording became the reference. Digital recording too. I wonder if they have a date for this. I wonder, just curiosity here. We have all this stuff here. No, of course not. It's in the big book that comes with this thing. But it was a very late recording, sometime in the 80s, I guess, and it became the automatic reference for the Diabelli variations. Everybody heard it and went, "Whoa! The Diabelli variations have arrived." Now, I mean, Arrau always had his detractors, his seriousness of purpose, sometimes amounting to heaviness, his gorgeous burnished tone, but boy, does he characterize these suckers. I mean, he really does a lot with the work, and that's what makes it so much fun. They just ooze personality, and you want them to, because that's what's in the music. There's so much range. It's just a vast range of expression in this piece, and so Claudio Arrau's was generally acclaimed as the reference recording for the Diabelli variations. Now, since then, of course, like I said, there's been a zillion other recordings of the work, but that's the one I would get if I were trying to figure out what they are like and what they are. However lovely these other ones are, and they are, it was in the nature of the work that people suspected there was always something more there, and we were still waiting for the performance that gave us the more, and Claudio Arrau did that. So there you have it, my friends, the reference recording for the Diabelli variations. Keep on listening, and take care.